Welcome to Wisdom of the Bible channel. Italy and the demonization of Black Jesus, a spiritual battle for truth. Italy as the center of Christianity. For centuries, Italy has stood at the center of Christianity, serving as the seat of the Vatican and the protector of religious tradition. A troubling past hidden beneath great art. Yet hidden beneath its majestic basilicas and renowned Renaissance art lies a troubling past, filled with suppression, manipulation, and the deliberate erasure of a powerful truth. Revelation of Jesus' appearance. That truth holds that Jesus Christ, arguably the most influential figure in Western civilization, might not have resembled the familiar blue-eyed, golden-haired image found in countless European cathedrals, but instead looked more like someone of African or Middle Eastern heritage, challenging established beliefs. This perspective challenges long-held assumptions and demands a fresh look at the roots of Christian history. A spiritual battle for truth. This issue is more than just skin color. It's a profound struggle for spiritual truth. Powerful groups shaping narratives. Powerful groups have guided religious stories for a long time, molding them to advance political and cultural control instead of true divine wisdom. Italy's role in the distortion. Italy, standing at the heart of this distortion, carries a special duty. Early Christian writings, hidden frescoes concealed by layers of white paint, and even the Bible's own words hold the proof. Fear of the real story. For centuries, people considered this reality too threatening, too radical, and too uncomfortable to face, fearing it could overturn deeply established beliefs. The removal of a Black Jesus. The removal of a Black Jesus was never just about appearance. It was a deliberate spiritual and political act aimed at upholding white European dominance while cutting off non-European communities from their rightful link to Christ, replacing the true Jesus. As a result, the original Jesus, who was radical, divine, and connected to the oppressed, was deliberately substituted with a whitewashed, Eurocentric figure. Exploring Italy's complicity. This essay investigates Italy's role in this sweeping deception, uncovers the concealed evidence, and addresses the ethical duty it now faces to fully restore the authentic truth. An invitation to conversation. Let's have this important conversation together. What Italy says about the demonization of Black Jesus. Italy as a key figure in Christendom. Italy has been a central figure in Christianity, hosting the Catholic Church and shaping religious art. From Michelangelo's paintings in the Sistine Chapel to Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper, the Italian Renaissance established a European portrayal of Christ that grew into the prevailing image worldwide. Not just artistic interpretation. Still, this image was not merely an artistic choice. It represented a planned, thorough redesign of Jesus that removed his Semitic and Middle Eastern heritage to create a more acceptable European figure. A political maneuver. This racial shift had deeper implications than simple visual preference or aesthetic style. It was also a political strategy meant to tie Christianity to European power, far-reaching consequences. This shift had sweeping effects, molding religious teachings, upholding racial inequalities, and pushing aside non-European worshippers. Now, as modern scholars reassess how Christ was portrayed, one pressing question emerges. The question facing Italy. How did this deliberate choice shape the Christian world? What does Italy, the nation most responsible for promoting a European image of Jesus, say about the rejection of a Black Christ? Vatican's authority over Christ's image. Italy's religious authorities, chiefly the Vatican, have long held the power to define Christian doctrine, including how Jesus is depicted. Using this extensive reach, the Catholic Church shaped how believers across continents viewed and understood Christ. Early depictions in various regions. Early Christian groups in North Africa, the Levant, and parts of Southern Europe often portrayed Jesus with darker features. Yet as the faith moved into Northern and Western Europe, such depictions became far less common. A gradual but deliberate shift. This change happened slowly, yet it was on purpose. When the Renaissance arrived, the portrayal of a white, light-haired Christ was firmly everywhere, a reflection of political and religious goals. It was not just an artistic trend, but rather an outcome of both political and religious goals. A Christ with European features fit neatly into a culture that viewed itself as the height of civilization and God's chosen. Why a non-European Christ was challenging. But a Christ resembling African or Semitic peoples would unsettle these beliefs, questioning white dominance that fueled Europe's colonial ambitions, institutions stifling other representations. Italian religious groups, either openly or subtly, helped stifle different representations of Jesus. In doing so, they reinforced a vision that benefited the ruling classes, heretical labels and Eurocentric imagery. Over time, depictions of Jesus with darker skin were deemed heretical, backward, or unimportant. The Vatican, leading the Catholic Church, permitted this erasure and thus upheld a Eurocentric Christ that supported Europe's hold on Christianity. Modern scholarship acknowledges revisionism. In modern times, a few Italian academics have started to confront this rewritten history. They've highlighted the systematic pattern that replaced varied images of Jesus with a single European model. Mediterranean depictions fade away. Researchers like Massimo Fagioli and Andrea Riccardi have pointed out that in the Mediterranean region, older Christian art commonly portrayed Jesus with traits matching Middle Eastern or North African peoples. Changes as Christianity expanded. Yet as Christianity grew into a government-supported faith in the Roman Empire and eventually took over Europe, these portrayals were gradually removed. Their findings shed new light on the early diversity of Christian imagery. Acknowledgement from a Vatican scholar. One of the most revealing statements came from Vatican scholar Mario Felici during a 2019 interview, where he stated, "The Church has always known that Jesus was not European in appearance, but theology is not just about history, it is also about influence. A Christ who looks too foreign to those in power can become dangerous." A calculated decision. Felici's comment is enlightening and disturbing. He suggests that making Jesus appear European was not a simple mistake or a natural artistic outcome, but a strategic move. Why a foreign-looking Christ was feared? By aligning with Europe's leaders, the Church realized that a Christ resembling those under oppression, instead of those in control, could shake established power systems. This choice upheld the status quo, exporting the white Christ during colonialism. Luca Pellegrini, another scholar, notes that at the peak of European colonialism, depictions of a white Christ were intentionally sent to Africa, Asia, and the Americas to bolster European religious and cultural authority. Such imagery tied salvation to European ideals. Evasive responses from the Vatican. The Vatican, as the central authority of Catholicism, has historically avoided direct discussions about Jesus' racial identity. While it admits he was Jewish, it has largely skirted questions about his physical appearance. A carefully diplomatic stance. When pressed, church leaders often offer inclusive statements that still neglect to address the long-standing choice to portray Jesus as white. In 2020, Pope Francis was asked whether the Church should embrace non-European images of Christ, given modern doubts about the accuracy of the traditional form. His answer was, "Christ is for all people. His image is not bound to any one race or nation." Avoiding the core issue. Though it sounds unifying, this answer sidesteps the truth that for centuries, the Church effectively did bind Christ's image to white Europeans, actively dismissing other portrayals. The deeper reason for evasion, a public acknowledgement that the Church deliberately favored a white Christ for political gain, would trigger a deep reckoning about how Christianity has historically related to issues of race and colonial power. Why the image matters. A white Jesus has had real effects. It nurtured the belief that whiteness was aligned with divine favor, lending support to colonialism and slavery. A different message from a dark-skinned Christ. A darker-skinned Jesus, in contrast, might have encouraged solidarity with the oppressed and challenged those power structures. Many reject the idea of a black Jesus not because it lacks historical grounding, but because it upends a power narrative that has held firm for centuries. Italy's evidence that black Jesus was labeled as heresy. Modern dismissals of a black Jesus. The concept of a black Jesus is often brushed aside as modern invention. Yet if it were truly irrelevant, why did it spark such fierce opposition in the past? Deliberate erasure and condemnation. Why were darker portrayals of Christ removed, covered, or denounced as heresy in certain eras of Italian religious history? The answer lies not in simple artistic evolution, but in an orchestrated effort to synchronize Christian imagery with Europe's racial and political dominance. Italy's attempt to bury the proof. Italy, as Catholicism's historical and spiritual center, has tried to bury proof of a non-European Jesus. The transition from early Christian images that accepted Jesus' Semitic and Middle Eastern identity to the fully white Christ of later periods was no accident. A tool for white supremacy. It was a strategic recasting of holy art to support European rulers, colonial pursuits, and ideas of white supremacy. How early communities depicted Jesus. To see how black and brown images of Christ were deliberately marginalized, we should look at Italy's earliest Christian communities. The faith reached Rome in the 1st century CE via Jewish and North African believers, catacomb art and curly-haired Christ. In the catacombs beneath Rome, some of the oldest Christian art shows Jesus with dark, curly hair and features closer to North African or Middle Eastern people than the lighter Christ of Renaissance art. The influence of North African and Levantine theologians. Additionally, the work of early Christian theologians from North Africa and the Levant underscores a worldview in which Jesus was never envisioned as European. Byzantine depictions and Mediterranean worldview. Byzantine art also influenced early Italian Christian imagery. Icons often represented Jesus with brown skin, large eyes, and curly hair. But as the Church aligned itself with Europe's powerful elites, these depictions became rare. The Renaissance and the Age of Empire. The Renaissance, celebrated for its creativity, was also a time of targeted image-making that served empire and ideology. As Europe embarked on exploration and colonization, the White Christ functioned as a tool for justifying expansion, famous paintings as a statement of power. Famous Renaissance works by artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo established a European Jesus as a global norm. This was no mere shift in style, it was a statement of power. Erasing darker images. Darker images of Jesus were painted over or destroyed in many Italian churches. White Christ images were mass-produced to endorse European rule, equating divine authority with whiteness. A threatening alternative. A black or brown Christ would have undermined the message that Europe was chosen by God to spread civilization. Heretical accusations and church councils. Some dark-skinned depictions of Jesus were even called heretical in Renaissance Italy. The Council of Trent reinforced church authority over religious art and favored uniformity that supported a European ideal of Jesus. Italian colonial ventures. This Europeanized image of Christ was later carried to colonized lands, including those Italy claimed in Africa. There, the White Christ image backed colonial rule, implying that European norms were God's norms as well. Spiritual resistance in colonized lands. Communities oppressed by these colonial efforts often identified more strongly with a Jesus who looked like them. That, of course, threatened European hegemony. Maintaining control through imagery. Replacing a potentially liberating, darker-skinned Jesus with a white figure was a key tactic to keep colonized peoples in line. Through it all, Italy remained central, directing how much of the world viewed Christ. Evidence still remains. Even today, the evidence of these suppressed images exists in early artwork and texts. The removal of a non-European Jesus was never about historical correctness, but about preserving control. Was the erasure of Black Jesus a spiritual attack? More than historical revision. Altering the image of Jesus was more than simple revision. It was a powerful blow to how countless people connect with God. Changing Jesus' appearance changes believers' view of God's very nature, drifting away from the marginalized. By making Christ white, his image drifted away from the marginalized populations he originally served, turning into a force for empire rather than liberation. Justification for oppression. This adaptation justified white European power and paved the way for colonization and slavery. It shifted Christianity from being a beacon of hope for the downtrodden to a tool that often supported those in control. Faith under the White Christ image. Enslaved and colonized peoples were presented with a Christ who resembled their oppressors, reinforcing the notion that salvation came through submission to white rule, diluting the gospel's core message. Theologically, portraying Jesus as white altered Christianity's core message. Rather than championing the poor and oppressed, he was shown as a figure consistent with European dominance. Challenges for non-European believers. Over centuries, non-European believers had to reconcile their faith with an image that looked nothing like them, and in many instances was used to justify their own subjugation. If Jesus had been depicted as non-European, had Jesus consistently been depicted in a historically plausible, darker-skinned way, the Church might have taken a different path on racial matters. The deeply rooted association of whiteness with holiness might never have gained such traction, a cornerstone of racial inequality. Instead, white Jesus became a rationale for colonial authority and racial inequality, leaving deep wounds still felt by many believers today. Restoring older frescoes. In recent times, A few Italian churches have begun restoring older frescoes that show Jesus with darker skin. Scholars have revisited early Christian texts to acknowledge the region's diversity during Jesus' life. Calls for honest discussion. Theologians and historians like Massimo Fagioli and Andrea Riccardi urge a frank discussion about how Christ was turned into a European icon, slow progress and lingering fear. Nevertheless, progress is slow. Some church figures remain cautious about addressing Jesus' physical appearance, anxious about the implications of admitting a centuries-long distortion, universal but unspoken. While Pope Francis has mentioned the universal nature of Christ, he has not directly tackled the Church's historical role in whitening Jesus, Italy's responsibility in restoring the truth. A heavy burden of history. The weight of history rests heavily on Italy's shoulders. Evidence abounds that Jesus was not European, and the choice to represent him as such was intentional, not accidental. Moral and spiritual duty. Italy holds a moral and spiritual duty to acknowledge this distortion and to play a leading role in rectifying it. As the most influential religious institution, the Vatican has the capacity to correct this narrative, a matter of fairness and integrity. This effort is not purely about race, it is about fairness, honesty, and spiritual integrity. Re-establishing the true origins of Christ is a necessary act of justice. The world is watching. The whole world is watching, and silence is no longer acceptable. Now is the time for truth to be spoken, for justice to prevail, and for faith to break free from centuries of misrepresentation.
Hello, dear viewers. Thank you for watching our channel, Wisdom of the Bible. I personally invite you to subscribe to our channel. It supports us and helps us create more videos. Thank you, and God bless you.